You're listening to the Aesthetically Speaking podcast, presented by Nextech.
Good morning, Nextech listeners. This is the Nextech podcast, and I am Robin Ntoh, your host. And today I have a very special guest, Amy Anderson. We are live at AM Spa, the Med Spa show here in Las Vegas at the gorgeous Wynn Hotel. And I'm going to let Amy tell you about herself.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me, Robin. I always welcome the opportunity to sit down with you. Yes, I am with ACG Practice Partners. We're a training and consulting firm that works with aesthetic practices exclusively. And we help with all things related to practice operations and people, hiring, training, and developing the right people for your team.
Well, that's important, especially when we think about the problem around people in general. Not always problem. I probably should say that differently. It's more about the complexities of people and whether they're patients or staff or providers. But you guys do such a great job with it. And you're not just a mature practice or a practice that wants to move into the next level. You work with brand new practices too. So you have so many learnings and so many insights. And I had the pleasure of really getting into a deep conversation with you yesterday about your journey into this. And there's so many things around it, which I would actually say gives you a level of credibility in this space because you've done this for a very long time and you've seen so many changes in this industry. It's an exciting time. There's a lot of technology changes, but there's also a lot of people changes. And I want to lean into today talking about patients and more specifically where patients really are looking for convenience. They're looking for things that make it easy for them to do what they need to do. And that means scheduling an appointment, filling out their online history, if practices do that, which I think is an area of opportunity. I'll be positive. I think it's around educating themselves. And when people want something, they're going to find the way. I look at the Amazon model. I can do it at 1 a.m. I can do it at 10 a.m. I can order whenever I want. It's designed to be at my convenience. And I can get it almost next day or sometimes the same day.
Right.
There's some of that that's starting to evolve.
Yeah. I think you just said the word. It's convenience, right? We live in a culture designed for convenience. And in almost any business, but especially in med spa aesthetic practices, it is, it's all about time, convenience, the fastest to respond, the easiest to get in. Those things trump price, even in a lot of cases.
Wow.
I do think sometimes we get fixated on, specials and what's going to draw people in. We can get away from that discount mindset and just focus on convenience and service and, having the options that patients want and making it very easy to get to them. It's opposite almost of the days, I've worked for years in plastic surgery, as you know, and it is it's a different shift. It's a different mindset from plastic surgery where we do have a few more barriers to entry, right? Where we really want to pre-qualify people before they come in. They have to speak with a patient care coordinator before they get a consultation. And I still believe in that. We on the plastic surgery side, we talk about that. But I think in aesthetics, it's a little bit different. It has to be easy, as you said, online scheduling, digital forms. I can book my appointment anytime, day or night, because the reality is most appointments aren't being booked between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
No. Studies have shown that a lot of appointments are done in the evening hours because that's when people are starting to feel like they can settle down and they can start gauging their opportunities and when they can do it. Going back to convenience, we think about the med spas as being the luxury offering. And we're evolving and changing so quickly in this space that I think sometimes it gets ahead of us. And those patient demands, there's a lot of patients out there that are ready and willing and wanting to get in. I think that I talked about it yesterday. It's not a demand problem. We've got the demand is there. People want these services.
Right.
I think it's and how we approach actually converting them into our practice. Some of it goes back to that convenience. Let's start with one of my favorite, but not so favorite topics, patient education.
Yes.
And I think that if we were to break it down generationally, education has to be delivered in multiple formats.
Right.
The same information, but in different ways that they can consume it and get to it.
Right.
Otherwise, they will find the way, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or, going to YouTube or Google, they're going to find the way. What are some creative things or some things that you have seen that have been not just ways to educate, but the right ways to institute education so that you're bringing in more qualified patients or patients that are well-informed before they sit in the chair?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the top thing that comes to mind is social media, which I think many of us have both a love-hate with, but it is essential. And that is really video content, video and audio content that people can consume in bite-sized chunks, right? Just very short-form video that it shares who you are, shares your personality, your philosophy of patient care, and teaches about procedures and what to expect. We see that practices that focus on that and do that well. And I'm not saying like the dances and the silly stuff. I mean, there's a small place for that, but I'm talking about real educational content. Patients start building that connection with you before you ever even meet them. And by the time they get into your practice, they feel like they already know you. And so, of course, then you have to act as though you know them and you feel that relationship with them. But I think really investing some time in doing video, whether that's a more long form content on YouTube or just short form on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, things like that. But it's the easiest and the lowest cost way to get education to patients. And it's kind of one of those things now that I don't think it's optional. Everyone's doing it. And it would be like, not having a website. If you don't have a website, you're almost not a real business, or I would maybe even just say we wouldn't think of you as a real business. And social media has become that for aesthetic practices specifically.
I would also say that one of the things that you and I have had the opportunity to work on is thinking about where CRMs, so those customer relationship management systems, which is really the new big focus area I'm finding. Nextech launched our CRM, late last year, and we talked about where that is critical in education as well. A lot of people think about it as just a lead management tool, collect the leads, but really it serves as a great educational platform, especially if you personify it around specific procedures. Then it drives this uniqueness to the business, the differentiation, but then the patients start to become more educated. I know you've done a lot of work in that area with practices. Let's talk about some of those interesting nuances around where you've developed that in practices so that they could really refine that and build themselves as more of an educational tool before the patient came in and less of just collecting leads. Took it beyond what people think it is into what it really can be.
Right. So yes, absolutely. A CRM, first and foremost, it is to collect the lead and so many features that helps us to respond quickly. But thinking about that long-term nurture sequence, that even though somebody indicated they had interest, they may not be ready to move forward today. But we know if they're interested at some point, the likelihood that they'll move forward in the future with somebody is pretty high. And of course, we want your practice to be the one that they think of again when the time is right. So building out procedure-specific content within your CRM allows you to continue dripping out information. And that's through a series of emails. It can be text campaigns. My favorite are practices that take it to the next level and use video, that you can drop video via text to a patient or embed it inside the email. If you are putting content on YouTube especially, let's link those into your email marketing so that we're reaching people in a number of different ways, but it keeps them connected to you, connected to your practice, and that top of mind awareness of who you are. And so when they are ready to finally move forward, of course, we want you to be the first that they think of.
Well, you specialize in this area. That's my next step came to you when we thought about this. And one of the things that I find intriguing is, you said the word drip campaigns. I know that a lot of our listeners may not understand that. It's a term used in the sales cycle. And it, to your point, nurtures someone as they come along that journey. But you're also an expert in understanding how staff really are critical to focusing on the human component. How in the world do practices nurture a patient without doing this. And you think about burnout and stuff. This is so critical that I don't think people understand the gravity of it's way beyond just lead management.
Right. Well, to your point, I mean, our staff are so busy and they almost all wear multiple hats. The demands on them are very high, and asking them to manually follow up with every lead multiple times without any kind of automation or system in place, yes, it could lead to burnout, but frankly, it just doesn't happen. In most cases, I mean, it just falls to the bottom of the priority list because the ringing phone, the patient coming in the door, all of the other things happening in the office take priority over regularly reaching out and nurturing those leads. So that's where technology leverages that. We can build it, we can make it still highly customized, but then there's automation. And so my team doesn't have to think about those steps every single day. The technology's making it happen. And then so they're reserving their energy for the patients who respond, the patients who then reply and say, yes, I am interested again. And now they can have that conversation, that phone call, that personalized interaction that we're not ready to replace our humans with, right? Like that human touch will forever be a part of our aesthetic practices. And so I want to reserve their time and energy for that. You know, we talk about often in healthcare, we want to use our team at the highest and best use of their time and their skills. We talk about it on the clinical side with licensure, right? We want people practicing at the top of license. Well, to me, this is kind of using our front end staff at the top of their ability. We're focusing them on those conversations, not sending out another email, not sending off some text messages that they're, copying and pasting from a template anyway. If we automate that, their energy is saved for those interactions.
How frequently do you find that you're really customizing those nurturing campaigns, those drip campaigns?
That's actually a really great question. In the beginning, it certainly takes a lot of time to set it up and to really hone it. And I do promote doing it by procedure so that somebody who's interested in a neuromodulator isn't getting the same, fat dissolving, messaging that somebody else might be interested in. So, but it's not a set it and forget it. I would say at least quarterly, I would be just going back through the campaigns, revising it, seeing what's new. Of course, again, if you're very active on something like YouTube or doing some publications, then I would update it even more frequently, like putting that fresh new content into it. I don't want to scare people, right? Like even just setting it up in the beginning, it's a big undertaking and it's really going to serve you well. So I think just a quarterly refresh is really all it would take.
Is that one of the services that you provide?
We do. Yes, we'll help practices with that.
I thought so. I know that you've spent a lot of time in that area because you recognize really where it helps the practice redirect all of that energy, like you said, so that your front desk are working at the top of their abilities. I like the way that you really position that because that's a great way to think about it. Let's transition. We've got the lead. We've nurtured them. Now they need to schedule an appointment. And I think this is where I still see practices don't all offer online scheduling. And I think that there's this fear that they can't control their schedule. Where I think technology's really provided and paved the way for that. Why do you think that they're still so worried about that?
Yeah. Well, you said it. It's fear. And I think it's almost fear of the unknown or a misunderstanding of what the software can do. There's this perception that it's just an open schedule and they can book anything they want at any time. Of course, we would not recommend that, right? We want to put some boundaries, some parameters around it, which starts with having a schedule template. And so if your practice doesn't have a template in place, we would need to start there and just designating, what appointments can go at what time, how long those appointments are, which is basic setup of the system. Anybody on the exec team can help with that. And then we decide, which appointments are available for online scheduling. We might not open it up to every appointment. If you block out an hour and a half for a laser, and they first need to have seen you for a consultation, then maybe those laser appointment blocks are not available for online scheduling. Maybe it's just our new patient consults or our neuromodulator appointments. So the practice can control that. It does take some planning to do it and the setup, but as long as we put that in place, online scheduling is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I still have practices who would say, I don't want anybody to direct schedule before they speak to an employee. And I understand that. And so my workaround there then is let's schedule those phone calls. Let's create a column and offer online scheduling for that pre-consultation phone call where we can educate them, answer their questions, talk about pricing to make sure they are a good fit and a good candidate for the practice. But they can still book that phone call at 10 p.m. when they're scrolling on their phone, sitting on the couch at night.
That's a great way to ease into the concept of fully offering it. I love that you said that. I know that there are practices today that still don't understand the power of it, but I also don't think that they understand there's so much flexibility in online scheduling tools. Nextech really has put some time and investing into those tools to really listen to what the needs are. And there's always more opportunity out there to do more. But you're right. There's also this level of understanding of what should your schedule templates look like to really facilitate on a higher level of utilization, really maximizing what your options are available in a day. And when you don't template a schedule, regardless of using online scheduling, I think if you don't even template your schedule well, then you're going to lose out on revenue. I actually seen this where practices will allow the patient to dictate when they're available. And they'll say, oh yeah, I can do 2:30. Well, then all of a sudden they've lost the 30 minutes before, maybe the 30 minutes after, which would have been a full hour of lost revenue that could have been booked for another patient just because they left it wide open and didn't template it. And I find that patients aren't really necessarily looking for you to just give them a carte blanche option for the schedule. Patients want options, but just saying I have 2 p.m. or I have 8 a.m. or something to that degree. I learned that 25 years ago when I was scheduling for a very busy ENT practice. And I will never forget that scheduler said, Robin, you don't give them carte blanche.
Right.
You really have to give them options, but it doesn't have to be everything.
Right.
Give them one morning and one afternoon option, and then let it fall from there. And she said, you would be amazed how people really still find that as options and they fall within it very well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just where we have to get to.
Yeah. We have to take control of the schedule or the schedule will be so inefficient. Yes. And it's not just an open column for patients to choose whatever they want. The practice really needs to design what that perfect schedule looks like and then intentionally fill it that way. And then when you see those little gaps or something that was unintentional, okay, so we start calling and we adjust appointment types. I do think it's important to say, even with online scheduling, it doesn't mean we don't pay attention to it. Somebody still has to take ownership of the schedule. What does it look like? Is it efficient? Did an online appointment come through that shouldn't have? And to be managing that. You know, sometimes practices feel more comfortable with just allowing appointment requests online rather than the actual scheduling of it, which means the staff is still reviewing the requests, confirming it before the patient gets the confirmation. So there's so many layers to it I just want to remind people, you still control the schedule. It's, you still have the ability to design what it should look like.
Absolutely. And I think if they're really tracking their KPIs, and utilization is one of them, some of that starts to reveal itself as you're watching it. Let's talk about another level of patient access or convenience, and that's the patient portal. And we know how important this is in the medical arena when we think about just, a dermatology practice or even a plastic surgery practice that does insurance. That's a requirement a lot of times around some of the insurance companies and what's necessary. And that's a whole other conversation we won't get into. But we know the portal is part of healthcare.
Right.
And patients that come into the med spa arena don't always think about that patient portal as being part of a normal medical practice. And a med spa still is a medical practice.
Yes.
First and foremost, they're practicing medicine, they're doing medical procedures in a luxury environment. So there's that component of medical. They don't have to do a portal, but I find that people shy away from it because they think patients won't do it. And some of that probably is very true, but I also think that there's a level of how well are we educating our patients? How well are we setting it up for success, using it to the right degree? But the outcome can be so beautiful in a practice, driving so much more efficiency and creating accessibility for a patient that they just normally wouldn't have.
You're right. It is so important to practices and to efficiency. If the patient will access the portal and complete all their intake information ahead of time, we're not waiting for them to, sit in the lobby for 15 minutes and complete it when they get there, or worse, complete it on paper when they get there. And then we have to still digitally enter that information. So my best recommendation is really training the staff on how to explain it to patients, and that we don't really make it an option, right? That we describe it as, this is the first step, and we do need this completed before you're able to see the practitioner. And if they ask, it shouldn't be a backup to do it on paper, if I can say that. We just really have to encourage them. But if your staff hasn't actually gone through the portal as a patient, oh my gosh, do that. I make that part of the onboarding and training for every new employee, is to get registered in the system as a new patient and go through the steps so they understand where they click, where they might get stuck, what button to hit. It's not difficult, but once you've seen it, it's a lot easier to guide a patient through it.
It's funny that you say that, because I think you're spot on. But I think the patients forget that this is the gateway into your protected health information.
Yes.
It is much like accessing your bank account. And I say that to people. I'm like, there's security around this on purpose. So a lot
For
of times,
your protection.
Exactly. And I often will hear, well, it times out. As it should, right? Because if you start your medical history and you start to complete that and you walk away for, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the timeout is, it's going to close that system down to protect your information, because some of the biggest breaches we see in healthcare are around patients' medical information getting out there, and then it's used, with these bad actors, et cetera. Yeah. But I find that people don't realize how critical those layers of protection have to be around the access to it. But once we break down those barriers, and to your point, having the staff do it is genius, because then they can help the patients actually execute on it better because they're more comfortable with it. Yeah. Let alone, you're creating a new level of efficiency, less inefficiency, because now your staff are not having a key and everything. I mean, we keep putting more and more and more on our staff.
Right.
And forget how frustrating, and it leads to burnout.
Yeah. And I would say, the portal should be the essential intake information that you need. I do think practices should take a fresh look at it and see, do we have too many questions on our intake form? I don't want to not ask the medical questions that our providers need. So as you very accurately said, this is still a medical practice. There's some very core information that we need to gather from new patients, but it's probably not 50 questions. Right. So we do see a drop in patient compliance the longer those intake forms are. So I'd say, what are the key things that we want to gather? And then what is more appropriate to be asked in the exam room once the patient's in the office?
You said it so well. I don't think I could say it better. But I do find that this is an area of big opportunity in practices. I mean, we see them starting to embrace CRMs. Online scheduling is but if I had to talk about all three of these things and back into where do we see the highest level of adoption, I would say the patient portal's the lowest, yes, if even something that they're even considering. So I'm excited that we've been able to talk about these topics today, because I go back to where we started. Patient convenience. It's what they want.
Right.
And if you don't offer it, I think that you're going to be the practice that's left behind in so many ways. And let's just add in here, what a great way to really build a strong culture in your practice by making things easier for your patients and your staff, so that they feel like, wow, I'm part of a forward-thinking, technologically savvy business.
Exactly.
So many things.
And all of that comes around to patient experience. I know we're talking about software and technology and efficiency, but we're doing all of that to create a better experience for the patient. And so I don't ever want to lose sight of that, right, that this is meeting their needs. It's meeting it in a way that is also beneficial to the practice, but everyone wins in this case. So it's not being resistant, or it's not just forcing the software on people. It actually is making a better experience, which is why we're all here, right? We're here to attract patients, to make them happy, to make them feel good. I don't think anybody's intentionally making things more difficult, but understanding that the software and technology can really help leverage that and just elevate the experience all around.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, let's tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yes. So my website is acgpracticepartners.com. As you mentioned earlier, we do all phases of practice consulting. So from startups through working with well-established practices, helping them become more efficient and helping them hire and train their team members.
And I also am going to add, I had the pleasure to be able to co-present with Amy a different type of events. Next Tech hosts regional events. Those regional events are something that we do throughout the year as a free opportunity for our own practices. So Next Tech listeners, always look for that information because those are slated throughout the year. So always more to come. But Amy actually co-presents with me on those. So it's exciting to be able to do things like this with her. So thank you for joining today.
Of course. Come spend a full day and a half with Robin and me. We have a lot of fun.
Oh, well, absolutely. For sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Aesthetically Speaking, the podcast where beauty meets business, presented by Next Tech. Follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Links to the resources mentioned on this podcast are available in your show notes. For more information about Next Tech, visit nexttech.com, or to learn more about TouchMD, go to touchmd.com.